There
Well,
you go.
I'm so
Awesome.
excited to talk to you. I'm glad Denise connected us.
Yes, I'm super glad that Denise connected us. And since we are recording this for podcast, um, I wanted to make sure that the audience knows who I'm talking to. So I'm talking to Nathan. Nathan was at the event production company. And we will chat today a little bit about the how to overcome some challenges that event production companies see on their end when planning meetings. And then it comes to the execution, and they are brought into the final stages, and things are not as they supposed to be. But Nathan, tell the audience, what do you do? What is the name of your company? Just basically give a little bit of a backstory.
Okay, sure. So the name of my company, and I actually have two companies now. NK Production is sort of my legacy, um, uh, my own sort of baby that I started in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 5 years or so, I've partnered with a like-minded colleague, Koegh, and we started a company called Pivot Event Productions. That is a combination of audiovisual consulting, production advising. And we're doing most things under that umbrella now, but I still have NK Production for some of my legacy clients that I've been working with for a very long time. My story is very interesting. I moved to Los Angeles in 2000 after doing some graduating from college in New York, where I went to school, and studying music and music recording arts. I moved to LA mostly just to play music and work in recording studios. But and I know you had a similar experience after the September 11 attacks in New York City. People's lives changed, especially if you were somewhere that wasn't particularly stable. I was young at the time, and after that, I needed a rent job. So I started working at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills in their in-house audiovisual department. In the 5 years I was there, I learned quite a bit about the audiovisual industry, prior to which I really had no knowledge. 5 years there is like a PhD in hoteliering, the audiovisual, production. We did every type of show there that you can imagine: corporate stuff, entertainment stuff, fundraisers, award shows, lots of high pressure clients, lots of high pressure situations. And
I found. Oh my goodness, my Siri.
she likes to jump in. She likes to jump in on things.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal.
And then, in 07, I'd sort of felt like I'd hit the ceiling there. So I moved out on my own, became a freelance, and a lot of clients that I'd worked with there, I stayed in touch with, and we eventually, did things elsewhere. And, and then it just sort of, your network grows, and I realized at some point, I guess I need to build a company,
right,
in order to do some of the projects I'm doing. And of course, over time, that led to doing bigger and better things. We got involved with, most of our projects. Our bread and butter is the corporate audiovisual, trade shows, conferences. Most of this stuff takes place at hotels and convention centers. And I don't know, the nature of, I think both my parents are educators. My father was a music teacher. My mother was she did special ed, she did curriculum, and she retired as an elementary school principal. So I think education is kind of in my blood, or at least ingrained through my growing up. And so one of the things, that I'm very passionate about is with our clients who don't have a background in theater or understand, production methodology, helping them to understand sort of the basic tenets of theatrical style production, because that's really what we're doing. I don't think people used to think of it that way, but I think in the last 2 decades, people have really come to, think of what we do as like corporate theater.
yes,
It's all about presentation, it's all about communication, it's all about an experience, not just people on stage, talking on and on and on and boring you to death with whatever it is. The whole experience has become paramount. So there are a number of things that that that's sort of led me to build presentations around. One of them is how to keep the experiences new and fresh without taking away from the message that you're trying to deliver. Some of it is technical, how to be aware of technical needs and put them in the right box so that they're taken care of. Not focus too much on experience, not focus too much on technical. Make sure you're blending all of the important things together in the right balance. And then another presentation that I've been working on and hoping to try and bring to clients has to do with negotiating some of the costs, because this is one of the things we see over and over and over. The venues that we go to are getting more and more expensive with things that at least I feel shouldn't be as expensive as they are. I know you come from the hotel background more so than I do. And so you probably have some more inside knowledge about this. But after the pandemic, of course, we're kind of looking at the world now, especially in our industry, as the pre-pandemic and the post-pandemic. Like before pandemic and after pandemic.
Right. It's like a fine line that the 2019 and then everything past 2020.
Yeah. It was like this before. Now it's not. It's like this now. But then infrastructure stuff, that's one of the things that has, like doubled at a lot of places, and it was high before. And so in terms of procurement, what we run into with a lot of clients is that, by the time we're involved with an event, contracts have already been signed. They're already tied into using the hotel rigging, electrical, and of course, some of those things are understandable. There are costs involved with those things, but they always seem to be really, really exorbitant. And so I like to try and talk to clients. One thing I've been trying to do and haven't been able to, and this is one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you, but like most of our clients, these hotel contracts are signed years before. Sometimes even the event planner I'm working with is involved with the event. And then they're in the position of having to go, oh my goodness, this is adding $100,000 to my budget. How I don't have this in my budget. Where did this come from? And then we're trying to work around it and see what we can do. And
right, without diminishing the quality of
the
experience that client wants to have during the conference. I totally understand.
And I've asked clients, who takes care of your contracts? Well, our DMC does that, years ahead of it. Oh, okay. Because of course the clients say, what can we do to get ahead of this for our next conference or bunch of conferences? I said, you got to get ahead of it years ahead. Otherwise that contract is signed. And what can you do at that point? I had a client put me in touch with their DMC, and the DMC person emailed and said, oh, just let me know what you want me to ask. I'm like, hey, it's a little more complicated than that. It's a challenging discussion, lots of nuance. And the person from the DMC really didn't seem interested in talking about it so that they could learn how to advocate for their client. And
right,
I don't work directly with DMCs, so I don't really know what their interest level is, or if they're my presumption is they're kind of in between the client and the hotels. They need both to trust them, and how much mediation they're able to do, I don't really know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Nathan, you are not the first person on the event production side that came to me with this problem. I have met with local event production companies that expressed exactly the same thing. How can we make sure that everything is contracted the way we want, and how to do it when we are not involved from the beginning? So from my hotel years, AV is always the last item.
Yeah.
Like, let's do everything, but the AV is the last one. And on the hotel side, you don't deal necessarily with huge productions. You deal with laptop, LCD projector, power strips, screen, flip charts, things that are really not that don't need a lot of setup time, a lot of, labor involved. But when we are talking about the conferences that are a true the game changer in the industry, where they do have staging and production involved, where they want to wow the clients that are coming to those conferences, because let's not forget, conferences is in marketing. That's a part of marketing department.
Yeah,
They
100%.
are trying to get the word out. They are trying to entertain potential clients that will bring money in. So event production is as important as everything else, as contracting the right venue, as, ordering the right food. It's on the same level. And not a lot of people look at it that way. Just like in a hotel, small meetings, where there is just, some simple AV needed. It's the same mentality with AV production company. We are the last ones to be involved, where in my, company, what I'm trying to do is educate clients on a holistic meeting planning, where you determine those needs from the get-go. And the process that I implement is, okay, let's look at your last 3 to 5 years of this conference that you are trying to put on, let's say in 2026. Let's look at the last 3 years. So what did you need? What was the biggest pain point? And usually the clients say, well, my AV budget, my production budget was just blown out because we didn't know what we're going to need, or the venue was contracted for 1-day load-in, where when I contacted production company, they were telling me that's not enough time. Then they had needed to schedule somebody overtime to work throughout the night, and it was twice as much labor cost. So all those things need to be addressed at the beginning, in order for you guys to do what you were hired to do, and not blow up clients' budget, because you got to do what you got to do, right? So for me, when I talk to my clients and I do the analytics of the last few events, conferences, that's what I try to determine in my first few questions that I have with client when we are meeting for the first time. Did you need AV production company? Did you involve DMC? If so, how much the DMC was involved? Did they help with transportation and signage? Or did you staff your registration desk with DMC folks? Did you have them arrange all the restaurant outings, and just basically define the scope of what is needed? And then from there, I always suggest that if they have vendor that they like working with in the AV production world, to then get me connected with them, so I can then create the correct RFP. Everything starts with the RFP. If the meeting space is not requested on the RFP the way it was supposed to, for example, 1 day of load-in is requested, but it should be for the amount of production 2 day, that's already from the get-go just you're basically contracting it wrong. And then if I don't involve you from the beginning, you are then in a bind.
And since you mentioned the RFP, it's funny, like I can't tell you how many RFPs we see that just come in from someone we've had no touch with before, and it's just a list, like, it'll just say 2 screens, speakers, 2 wireless microphones. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, is it a 500 person audience? Is it a 3,000 person audience? Is it a 50 person audience? Because that determines what size screens you need, how big of a PA you need. Like, it could be a $10,000 audiovisual proposal. It could be a $100,000 audiovisual proposal. And we'll sometimes email clients back, when we get those, and say, really glad to hear from you, but we need a few more details, to give you an accurate quote, or even an estimate, even an accurate ballpark estimate. And and sometimes we'll never hear back after we ask a few questions. Sometimes, and government, this is very typical of government entities, they'll send something, and, they're sending it out to so many vendors that they don't want to answer questions for everybody. Sometimes there'll be a Q&A period. They'll shoot the answers back to everyone, but a lot of times they don't even know how to answer the questions. And so we get into and that's part of what, I've been trying to alleviate, helping clients to understand what questions they need to ask, that before you send out an RFP, you really need to get with a consultant of some kind to determine, what good is an RFP if it's not accurate to the event you're going to have.
Right. And, on the venue contracting, sales manager should know all those things so they can contract correct space. Because if the client doesn't know what kind of production they have, it's as simple as, do you want front screen projection or rear screen projection? Because if you are thinking about the rear screen projection where everything is hidden, that space needs to be larger.
Right.
For this amount of people, it always needs to be larger because of how your screen, how much space it takes. And I see, like, out of the most simplest questions, that should be one of them. Because the sales manager then needs to justify the amount of space to their executives, when each hotel has a daily BR meeting, like from your hotel days, where every piece of business that comes through is evaluated. And when, for example, you have 100 rooms, but you need, let's say, 50,000 square feet of meeting space, no hotel will give you 100 rooms this much space unless you justify it and you say, I need it because I have extensive production needs. And even then, the hotel might say, nope, we won't give you this much. We can give you this much, because it's all about the rooms to space ratio. That's basically how hotels look at it. So there's also that element that hotels need to understand, that when there is some kind of very imbalanced rooms to space ratio, ask the question, why do you need this? Can you tell me more about your program? This way, there's always that buffer to prevent them looking bad when it comes to execution. And, to answer your question about how to do this when the program is far in the future, when program is, sometimes the meeting planner is not there that contracted the space. I think that's when having people like me that can have that centralized information is crucial. And if the company doesn't want to have that middle person like me, and what my company is doing, the easiest way is to just look at the past contract, look at the past. If there's another issue with that, is that not everybody one
of the first things we always ask people is, have you had this event before? And if so, can we look at your bill from last year? I don't need to see the pricing, you can black it all out. Seeing your pricing isn't really going to affect how I price it or anything, but sometimes I'll look at orders from past years and they'll be so generic that I just look at it and say, you could want me to rinse and repeat the event you had last year, and from the order I'm looking at, I wouldn't know what you did. I wouldn't even know what quality equipment you had because it just says speaker cabinet. Well, speaker cabinets, like everything, they're not made equal. You know, we use expensive speaker cabinets. You know, some other entities use really cheap speaker cabinets. And what I tend to find is that the entities that just put speaker cabinet on their orders are using cheap ones. They actually don't want to give you the make and model. They don't want to put Meyer, you know, UPJ, whatever series, because they don't want you to look it up and know that they're charging you half the purchase price rental for, you know.
Right. That's what happened in the past with LCD projectors, and
yeah.
LCD projector, one is not equal to the other. My client wanted to save few bucks and said, well, we have an LCD projector, we will bring it in. Well, they brought it in, and the picture was this big on a screen this big.
Yeah.
And you cannot, when you zoom it out, zoom it into the size of the screen, it gets blurry. It's not, you know, it's not bright. It's not.
We had that happen a bunch of times in the, you know, like in the late 2000 aughts, right? Projectors got small enough to where clients went, oh, well, okay, the hotel AV wants $800 for every little LCD projector in every little breakout room. And they're going, we could buy little LCD projectors for $800. And they would go out and buy them. And they weren't wrong, right? The hotel AV company is generally charging anywhere between a quarter, you know, 10% to 30% the purchase price of that item. You know, just for the rental of it. So they're not wrong about the fact that, yeah, they could buy their own and then save some money and then they have them. The trouble is, like you're saying, that if somebody went out and bought a whole bunch that were the wrong resolution,
right?
Then you plug in all the, you know, we had this happen more than once. Clients plugged in laptops in all these breakout rooms and it's not formatted right on the screen. And what's the problem? Is, well, these projectors you bought are like from like 4 years ago. They were cheap because somebody was just trying to get rid of them. They're no longer the resolution that computers are now. So you have all these like HD computers going into standard def projectors and it doesn't match up. And so it's kind of like they were on the right path, but they didn't talk to anybody about buying the right thing. They just, you know, went, oh, projectors are projectors, which, and like everything in our industry, there's a ton of science, like even just projectors. I could do a 2-hour presentation on all the differences: LCD, DLP, laser phosphor, 3-chip, single chip. You know, there's the touring quality ones that have steel frame bodies. There's the less expensive ones, you know, the boardroom projectors some people are trying to do tours with, and then they get beat up and they wonder why. And it's like cars. There's as much variety, quality, and value in, you know, from the cheapest car brand new to the most expensive cars brand new. And which one do you need for your application? And it's the same with audio and lighting. When we came out of the pandemic, there had been so much technological advance. There were 2 challenges. One was there had been a lot of technological advances because we'd all been kind of just at home for a year and a half. But then there was also a problem of availability. Like nobody could get anything for a long time. So a lot of the value of a lot of the existing equipment went up, which is partly why prices went up. When events came back, I mean, I don't know about other companies, but we were just slammed for really, we've been slammed since the pandemic sort of ebbed away. We haven't slowed down. And equipment has been in really, really, really high demand. And so we didn't raise pricing as like an opportunistic sort of thing. It was more of a trying to take care of everybody's needs all at once. We were sourcing from multiple different places, and our manufacturers also raised prices. And it was like, well, the only way to, you know, use this piece of gear on this show and then this show and then this show. And a lot of it was we weren't trying to use it as much as we were, get it out as much as we were. We just had clients who were like, if you can't get it to us, we're not going to be able to get it. There's no one else has it available. And so there were shipping charges, and we'd have to do like, you know, quick turn maintenance and things like that. And so, pricing just had to go up to cover all of that additional administration, logistics, and QC. I'm getting a little bit off topic, but one other thing that I wanted to touch base on, I actually have this in one of my presentations pulled up in front of me. So with regard to the infrastructure stuff, there was one show that we did at 3 different hotels, and there's a little excerpt from my infrastructure negotiation presentation. The same client, 3 different hotels in 3 different cities: Vegas, Houston, and DC. So different parts of the country, different regions, different, however, they were all 2 of the 3 of them were Marriott brands. I won't say which, but they were Marriott brand hotels, which narrows it down to half the hotels in the world. The other one was one of the bigger Vegas venues. So the electrical costs across those 3 venues, and we had more or less the exact same show. But in 2016 at their show, we paid about $5,000 for our electrical needs, our power distribution and engineer to connect and disconnect. The next year in Houston, we paid $3,000 for more or less the same thing. And the next year in DC, 2019, we paid $15,000. So it's 3 different years, $5,000, $3,000, and $15,000 for essentially the same thing. The show didn't change much. It was about the same size every year, 1,500 attendees. Our AV set was pretty much the same every year. And so, the question becomes, why this drastic difference between these 3 properties, 3,000, 5,000, 15,000?
Right.
It's really arbitrary when it comes to things like the electrical. They'll get what they can get.
Yes. And it's kind of like with the guest room rates. What you get in Houston as a guest room rate, you will definitely pay more in DC. And it's
Sure.
It's the same hotel. Let's say, JW. It's JW in Houston, JW in DC.
Yeah.
Totally different rates because you are in different region. And then, when you toss into it Las Vegas and all the union cost of labor, especially since any event production that is outside in Las Vegas needs to have that shadow person. I remember working for hotels in Las Vegas because my last 5 years of hotels was selling for one of the largest companies of hotels on Las Vegas Strip. That leaves you with choice of 2.
Yeah.
that owns one owns one half of the strip, the other half of the strip. Yeah. So when you I remember contracting a client that one year their total AV bill was $17,000, and the next year it was $175,000.
Wow.
And
more or less the same thing.
Exactly the same thing. Replica of the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm learning that sometimes, and this is this is not a very well-known fact, but sometimes how the hotels contract with the AV company that they are using makes a whole lot of difference.
Oh yeah.
One chain can contract much more favorable terms for the client that they are trying to bring to their hotels, which then results in much lower rates and because AV is a subcontractor in both of those companies in Las Vegas. One, you will have a $17,000 AV bill, but you go to the other side of the strip and your AV bill starts to be $175, and you just go, wait a minute, what just happened?
Yeah. Most of, I mean, at this point, there's been so much consolidation at least in the hotel audiovisual industry. I mean, pretty much almost every property now is Encore or 5-star AV. Um, PSAV and Encore were the two biggest, then they combined and took the Encore name. And so, I mean, it's been more or less monopolized for the last 2 decades by just a number of companies. And for the last, I'd say 15 years, commissions of 50% or more are standard. So I mean, yeah, if for a show that we would bid $50,000 to a client, the in-house AV is going to be $100,000 because they'd have to give $50,000 to the hotel right off the bat.
Yeah.
And so they need to, essentially charge double. And the drawback to that is, and I saw this when I was at, the Beverly Wilshire, Four Seasons. So I had to go through Four Seasons orientation and training because even though we were a subcontractor, we were part of Four Seasons and part of a Four Seasons hotel. And of course, being there in Beverly Hills, like customer service is, the pinnacle of everything. But this relationship with the audiovisual, in-house audiovisual, I just didn't see. I saw hypocrisy because Four Seasons' whole mantra was, yeah, it's expensive, but you get the value, right? It's expensive, but you'll recognize the value of that price. Well, not with the AV. You were paying double for people who were making half.
Right.
Technicians come out of the hotel AV industry with that having been their training ground, where the hotel AV company was charging $125 an hour for them, and they were making $15, $20 an hour.
Right.
Then once they go freelance after 5 years of having experience and realizing, wow, I could do a lot better, they go freelance and they're making $40 an hour for a company that's charging $80 an hour. I don't know. It varies from company to company. I mean, we actually don't make much on labor. And the reason is because we sort of focus on charging, at least making our profit on equipment and production consulting. When it comes to the labor, we're only charging enough for it to kind of cover our overhead, our workers' comp, insurance, and so on and so forth. So, like, if we have a technician that's, the high-end guys now are like 750 day rates, so they're $75 an hour. So like we're typically only charging 85, 90 an hour. But our clients are getting that value because they're getting someone who's not just making good money, but is worth that money, right? They have enough experience to command that salary, as opposed to paying $125 an hour for someone who's making $20 an hour and is almost borderline on-the-job training, very light in experience. Now, that's not to say everybody in the hotel industry is a new on-the-job training, person. I know lots of folks who work in the hotel AV, and they've been there for a long time, have a lot of experience, but that's not the norm. Most of the time, you're going to have far less experienced people using the hotel AV while paying a lot more. The rigging stuff at hotels really kills me. The entertainment rigging. That's one of those things that I talk about. You're really never going to be able to negotiate that out. So what I try to advise clients is you're not going to be able to negotiate it as their house, flying the stuff overhead. They're going to insist that they do it, even though there's other certified licensed rigging companies in every city who are doing even bigger stuff, right? They handle the arenas, they handle the theatrical venues. Hotels will never admit it, but there are other rigging companies that know what they're doing and can do it safely and are insured and are licensed, but they won't let them in their building. So while at least given the current situation, you're not gonna be able to negotiate another rigging company coming in, but at the very least, what you should try to do is negotiate what it's going to cost. When I look at the rigging rate sheets for hotels and convention centers, and it's always the third-party venue, the in-house AV company providing it, they want overtime for riggers who work past 6 p.m. It's entertainment, right? Entertainment industry, like it's not banking hours, you know what I mean? Like, it's like beyond 6 p.m. or before 8 a.m. They want to charge overtime. Those employees aren't getting overtime.
Yeah, exactly.
They
Because
they also
they are
they want
scheduled
double.
for a shift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they want double time on a Sunday. Those guys are making their regular hourly rate, whether it's midnight, Sunday, what you know what I mean? But then the in-house AV company wants to charge you 250 an hour for the rigger who's making 25 an hour
I,
just because it's Sunday. Like it's so arbitrary. And so those are the things that I advise clients, like negotiate these things at least before you sign the contract. Negotiate, you might not be able to negotiate it out, but negotiate what it's going to cost. Negotiate away that 18% service charge. I mean, that's just like, to me, adding insult to injury. You're going to charge me $250 an hour for someone you're paying $40 an hour, then add an 18% service charge to it.
18% service charge is still on the low end. Now I'm seeing more like
25.
23, 25.
Yeah.
Those are kind of where at least the hotels that I'm dealing with is just anywhere between 23 and 25 as a standard. And to add the how hotels are kind of well, how AV companies and hotels make their money is also, we require 5 hours for strike down when there's like a screen and a projector and AV.
Yeah.
You need 5 hours for that. So I always negotiate those down, but the lowest that I was able to negotiate it down was 3 hours minimum, and they did it in 45.
Yeah.
And my client came back to me asking, well, we know for a fact they did it in 45 minutes, maybe an hour, but we are charged for 3 hours. I'm like, well, it's negotiated down from 5, and the AV was not budging on it.
Yeah.
Adjusted even further.
They like to try and justify it by saying, well, we had to bring somebody in. And if we're going to bring somebody in, they're a 5-hour minimum. And then I say, well, what's the point of using in-house AV then? I may as well use an outside company that, they actually have to bring somebody in for 5 hours. And, the point of using in-house, like when you go to the restaurant, they don't say, well, you have to pay for a 5-hour shift for a server because they had to come to work today. Like, no, they're already there. You've hired them. They do,
Yes.
If let's say nobody came to the restaurant on a particular night, and then one person came into the restaurant, would they say, since you're the one that came in and needed something today, we have to charge you for the server's entire day? Like, no.
I
The
find
purpose of in-house altogether.
right. And like all this time that we have been chatting, Nathan, what I'm thinking of is how unregulated it is. Therefore, the AV companies do what they want to do. They make their own rules as they go, and people pay for it because they have no other choice. That's what infuriates me, is when I am trying to have a conversation with the AV in the hotel, and they just know they have the business because the client at least will pay for the rigging, power, and labor, even if there is nothing else.
The way it works out with most of our clients, it's like, get a quote from the in-house AV. If it's $200,000, then, we can do the job for $100,000 because we don't have to give the hotel half. Now, if you go with us, you're not going to get the comps that like the in-house AV isn't going to charge you for the electrical. They're going to charge you for the rigging, maybe not as much. They may comp some internet services, Wi-Fi and such. So all things, so regardless of which way, they kind of have it worked so that no matter what you do, you spend the same amount of money. So if our client is going to spend $100,000 with us and then still have to spend another $100,000 on electrical rigging and IT, at least they know they're going to get a quality audiovisual experience. And that's the most important thing. So they end up spending the same amount because the hotel is sitting here going, okay, you don't have to use our in-house AV, but we still want our money. So we're going to charge you for the electrical, the rigging, no discounts, 40 grand for internet for your 800 attendees, right? And we're going to get our money that way if it's not this way.
Yeah.
And you're stuck if you've signed the contract. So it really goes back to what you were talking about at the very beginning of the procurement stages, with having all your ducks in a row and saying, we know we're going to bring in our outside AV, but the hotel doesn't know that. So when we negotiate this contract, let's negotiate for every possible outcome and say, if we use the in-house AV, these will be the costs for rigging and electrical. If we use an outside vendor, those costs will still be this, or they'll be this. Because that's where the hotel kind of, I don't want to, I mean, they've been doing this a long time, right? So they've got all the ways you can get to their bottom line pricing figured out.
Yep.
If the client does this, we do this. And that's the thing that always kills me is, with my clients, it's like, okay, yeah, you signed the contract, but there's no pricing in the contract. What pricing did you agree to?
Right.
Oh yeah, you're right. We agreed to use them, but you're right. We didn't agree to any pricing. Right. So now you're stuck. They could just say what it is, whatever they want it to be.
That and F&B. I always put in my contracts that I negotiate for my clients that hotel will honor this year that we are contracting pricing, and then on the rate that if there is a we're talking about multi-year, there is maybe 3 to 5% year-over-year increase on the guest room rate, because it's just, again, so unregulated that just recently a friend of mine who's in the same industry as me, she was like, the hotel gave me year-over-year over 140% increase on the rate. Like, how is that possible?
Yeah, because they can.
2023 to 2024. I'm not talking from 2019 to 2021. That is anything 2019 and below.
Yeah,
has gone. We know that won't come back.
Yeah,
but this year over the next year, she was like, I called the hotel and I told them, you realize that this is unacceptable to have that kind of change year over year.
Yeah, it's huge. They're making up for, and of course this
I think we got
losses because they have something that people, for which there's high demand, right? Oil industry comes to mind. Yes. Tourism, there is some supply and demand at play, right? Demand goes up, supply remains the same, price goes up. But then there's also being opportunistic, of course. There's ultimately, in a capitalist environment, whoever's controlling the product has the power, right? One of the tough things with, being in events, especially ones that take place at hotels, and especially the larger events, is that there are only a couple of hotels in every major city that can handle the larger events. And they know this, right? The Marriott Marquis and the Gaylord in DC, and the other hotels there that can handle large events, the places in LA, like the Beverly Hilton, the JW Marriott at LA Live, Southern California. I mean, I know it the best because that's where we're based, of course. There are a lot of venues, smaller markets, in some smaller cities like, Philly or Dallas. Like, yeah, there's only a handful of hotels and they know who they are. And they're like, well, you don't want to pay our pricing, try over there, but they're not going to have availability. And here again, this is where the larger shows, the sales kickoffs for, tech companies, they're planned 3 to 5 years out because they need to get that space booked. That's how demand it is, how in demand it is. And so the only thing that we can do to advocate for our clients, because of the lack of regulation and the monopolization of the hotels, I feel bad for the in-house AV companies, to be honest. I feel bad for the folks. I know a lot of them, and it's tough to be a sales manager or director with an in-house AV company and try to charge what you're charging and then deliver what you're supposed to deliver, because you're working under the worst of circumstances. You're trying to charge a lot and get clients to agree to it. You've got a talent pool that is you may have a couple really great players, but the rest of your team is still building, right? You're still, what do they call it when a sports team is like losing year after year? Oh, we're rebuilding, right? The in-house AV teams may have a couple star players, but for the most part, they're always in a state of rebuilding. And clients don't want to spend that much money and then get a team that's rebuilding. They want an elite team. They should have an elite team for that pricing. So the best we can do is advocate for our clients to this is kind of, it's rigged against you.
Yeah.
Hotels they're trying to make back the money they lost in the pandemic. And, I can understand trying to make back what you lost in the pandemic, but a lot of us don't have that luxury. Those that do, they're
face it, like the pandemic was 2 years ago. Stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Stop already. Yeah.
Because now I would say that is called greed. And that excuse, I feel that by the end of 2023, nobody will have a right to say we are trying to make up what we lost at least in hotels world.
Yeah.
Because the rates that they are charging and F&B minimums and gosh, room rental, wherever you go now, it's a room rental. And we know that is 100% pure profit to the hotel.
And on the technology side for us, that's like the IT, right? They already have internet services at the hotel. It doesn't cost them anything extra to share it with you. So $40,000 is just like, what?
Unless they need to bring in additional broadband. Like I know that much, that unless they have, because each hotel has a X amount of broadband for just people to use. But then if the client needs, let's say for live stream, they need to have much bigger capacity for the internet. I know that that's where I'm having conversations with hotels on. And
there's, and that's one of those things where I actually have a colleague who helps me with our IT consulting because that's not my wheelhouse. I probably know more than the average person, but of course, my IT consultant is like a wizard, right? I used to think that too. I'd be like, oh, well, we're streaming, so we need a higher rate service. And he would say, no, you don't. I'd say, what do you mean we don't? And he'd say, you don't necessarily need more bandwidth. You need a lower latency. And I'd say,
my gosh, I just remember.
He's like, it's not necessarily about the speed of your connection. He was like, it's about it being managed properly. It's about, and he's right. We had a conference at one hotel one year where they were deploying a new app. And during the session, when they said, okay, everybody go on your phone, download the app that we're deploying, 2,000 people go to the app store to do it at once. And it doesn't work for anybody because they're all doing it at once and the lines are getting clogged. And, the hotel ended up refunding like the $30,000 IT charge or the Wi-Fi charge. The next year, my client said, what is the deal with these hotels? Like, we paid a lot for the internet. Why didn't it work? And I said, because there's really no IT professional at a hotel. It's managed by the audiovisual company. The audiovisual company has no IT professionals. They know just enough to give you a password so you can log in without being charged, but there's nobody there who can manage the network properly. So the next year we brought in our IT consultant. He, even though they had to pay the hotel for the internet service, he came in, logged into their systems, managed the network so that it worked properly. Because this is the case at so many hotels, right? They give you the password. Everybody's going, I can't get on. It doesn't work. I don't know, my buddy comes in and he kind of takes over the network, manages it the way it's supposed to be managed properly. And then all of a sudden it works for everybody. Like, to us, it's just sort of magic, right? Like, oh, we brought in the wizard and he did his thing. A lot of what he's doing. And what's funny is that at some point, AV companies started to learn that part of it might be their fault, right? When we come into a ballroom for a show, my audio guys have their own private Wi-Fi network they're setting up to run their equipment on. My projectionist has a Wi-Fi router he's putting up in our lighting truss for the projectors and, communications with them from his laptop. Our video guys are setting up Wi-Fi networks because there's so much you can do now from, your computer, your phone, or whatever, remote control your devices. Well, all these Wi-Fi routers end up in the room, and now you've got all of this radio frequency building up in the room and interfering with the access points that the hotel has for their Wi-Fi network, which are all the way up on the ceiling, farther away than all ours, which are down here on the ground. And at some point, when I started to get more educated on IT, I was like, we might be the problem. So my IT guy comes in and he taps into everybody's router who's using one, everybody's Wi-Fi network that's using one for whatever they're doing with it. And he narrows their bandwidth down to just what they need so that we're not clogging up the air in the ballroom with all this stray RF. Mm-hmm. And he also manages the Wi-Fi network from the hotel. And of course, the in-house AV companies didn't even know enough about IT to say, well, we don't know why it's not working. I mean, they could have blamed it partly on us. It might have been partly our fault. Of course, we didn't know at the time. There was a time when everybody bringing their own Wi-Fi access point was a new thing, and nobody was thinking about how all that RF in the air can mess things up. But now we're smarter about it. And not a lot of companies do this, but it's something that I talk to all my clients about it. Like, how important is it that the internet access work? Right. How important is it? I mean, if that's the case, then our IT guy is now like a regular position on our shows.
Yeah.
It typically isn't, but we've tried to make it so.
Yeah. I must say that the hotel, they are trying to bring in revenue from any
possible source
that they can. And I feel that educating the clients on what really is going on is crucial. So I think that maybe we should start like a series of recordings where you and I just talk through some of the pain points that are brought even to us by our clients or by other event production companies, because I think educating first thing that will stop the madness, I think, is educating the clients on what truly to believe when they are talking to on-site event, AV event person, and then kind of do like a consulting episodes where we can talk through all those issues, because there is a lot, and I know that companies are complaining about the cost, they are complaining about quality. Encore is definitely not being seen as a great company by a lot of meeting planners. They don't like to work with them, and the monopoly that they have on the market is just not in favor to them. I'm getting like a tickle in my throat.
Oh no. Well, and it's unfortunate because, Encore, like, I know a lot of great people with Encore, and it's super tough being in that industry. And, when it comes to like Encore and Five Star and the other in-house AV companies, I just sort of go, I mean, it is what it is. I don't know whatever possessed someone to say, hey, a good business model for us would be to give half of our gross income to someone else. I don't know how that got started. It was a little lower when I was with Swank Audiovisual at the Beverly Wilshire. I mean, Swank got absorbed by PSAV a decade ago, and then PSAV became Encore. I think our commission was like maybe 35% or something. And from what I understand, it was a little lower before that. But even 35% was tough, to make a profit. If we needed a piece of gear that we didn't own, then we had to charge like triple the price. Like if we had to cross rent it for $500, then we had to charge $1,500, because we'd have to give $750 to the hotel or $600 or whatever. Then to make a couple $100 on $1,500, we'd have to charge $1,500 for something we'd rent for $500. It was insane. And so I kind of feel for them, but I kind of don't, because it's a tough place to be, but at the same time, they put themselves there. They agreed to this relationship. And so, and it's also unfortunate, when clients do use in-house AV, like they shouldn't be paying. I mean, nowhere should you be paying. I don't even know what that works out to, like like 6 or 7 times for a person than that person's actually making.
Right.
It just, you're definitely not going to see the value. And that's kind of what killed me about, the Four Seasons, when they just talk about customer service and getting the value for the money you're spending, is like, well, not over here, you're not.
Right. Right.
um, if you're really caring about your customers, your guests, then you just say, you know what, we don't do the AV thing at all. You know what I mean? Bring whoever you want, do your gig.
Yeah. But somebody somewhere
Yeah,
wanted to get rich.
right.
So they're like, okay, we're going to create monopoly. We're going to buy out all those companies, and we will be the only one that hotels are using, because we will bribe them with,
And I don't know,
commission, paying it back.
and I don't know as though anyone's getting rich off of that part. It is more money for
Somebody
sure.
is getting rich off of that.
I think somebody's getting extra rich off of it. Like, they're already rich, they're just getting a little more rich.
Right.
Because I mean, F&B is really where the money is, right? In hotels.
Um,
Or is that not so much the case anymore?
no, because then you have the food cost, and the chefs in the hotels have impossible task of keeping food costs down. That's where they get in trouble if their food cost goes up even week over, like month over month.
Is that a pre-pandemic or a post-pandemic thing? Because again, when I was at the Beverly Wilshire, I just remember seeing the graphs where it was like, the breakdown of revenue, and it was like, like 60% of all the revenue was F&B operations.
Yes, as long as the cost can be kept down.
Gotcha.
So that's between the kitchen and the vendors they are using. That's their task, to keep the cost down, so whatever price the client is paying can be that part of the revenue. So yes, it is a big chunk. There are some fluctuations there. And then of course, the room rates.
Yeah.
When the rooms sit empty, that's where you lose money. So that's why
I think that was like the next biggest revenue. So it was like F&B, then rooms, and then like everything else was somewhere after that. So yeah, what they get from the AV is it is a chunk, but it's not like they'd go out of business if they didn't have it.
Right.
It's not like a mission critical, like we have to have this revenue to stay in business or even to continue making a good profit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. It's just somebody going, how can we squeeze more money out of? And I remember when when I was very new to this industry, I remember talking to a supervisor that I had about it. And he was maybe 10, 15 years older than me. And I remember he said, hotels, and I sort of saw this overlap, where when people started bringing in cell phones, when it became more common for everyone to have a cell phone in their pocket, they stopped using the hotel phone. And I didn't realize that there was a time when hotels made a killing on people using the phone in the room at the hotel. And I found out the hard way back when I barely made any money. I did an event with the AV company I worked for, and they all put us up at a nice hotel because it was out of town, and we stayed at the hotel where the conference was going on. And it was in LA, but at the time I had a girlfriend who lived in Pasadena, and I was calling her on the phone every night to chat. When I left, I had a $400 phone bill that was added to my room stay. And I was like, I don't even make that in a week. And now I have this additional because I didn't know, I'd never stayed anywhere that nice or where and I learned the hard way and I'm thinking, aren't these local calls? And they're like, oh no, Pasadena is not local. And I'm like, oh my God, I was like checking out, and I just turned like beet red because I didn't understand that, I was like, and it really actually bowled me over. I was like, how can they, even if these were long distance calls, how could they charge me $400? I've never had a phone bill that big, and I've made long distance calls. And that was sort of my trial by fire on like, oh, they charge 10 times what it actually costs. So I remember talking about that at some point with my supervisor, and he's like, well, yeah, they have to find places to replace that revenue. Like, yeah, they used to do a conference for however many people, and they would make a killing on phone charges. Now nobody uses the phone in the room. They got to go find that revenue somewhere else.
Yep. So that's why when I see resort fee, that the local and not international, but that the local calls included. I'm like, yeah, no, we got to take that out. That resort fee is going down. Nobody uses hotel. Like, I'm like, why do you even have it listed there? It
Yeah.
just, yeah, just.
Well, and when it's the main ball, you know, if you're paying to rent the ballroom, you know, the electrical anyway, part of my infrastructure presentation has to do with like, why isn't the electrical just included? It's part of the room. Nobody would rent the room if it had no electricity, right? They don't charge you for the lights in the ceiling. Well, no, because you know that a place has to have lights to have an event. They don't charge you for the water, right? I guarantee you 1,000 people are using way more water than they are electricity, but they're not charging you for the water utility.
Right.
The electricity is just one of those things where they go, oh, you want to plug in your power distro? Well, that's a 3-phase, 200 amp 3-phase service backstage. That's going to be $5,000. And then I say $5,000. Well, because it's 3-phase. I say, so that's just the equivalent of 3 different wall outlets. I mean, not exactly, but in layman's terms, it's like, that's just 3 different, well, it's a cam lock connection. So that's just a bigger plug than what your toaster plugs in with. It's still just a plug where ultimately everything we use still just draws the same electricity that all the stuff in your house does. A show that we do for a week at a hotel doesn't draw any more electricity than an average residential home draws for 1 month. Is your monthly electric bill $5,000? No.
No.
Plus, they want to charge $500 for an engineer to come plug it in and take it out. And going back to your thing, it's a 15-minute job. You know what I mean? It's connecting 5 camlock connectors. It takes 10 to 15 minutes tops, and they want to charge $500 for an ingoing connection and an outgoing connection. Half the time we do it ourselves because you call for the engineer and wait around an hour and finally like, just plug it in ourselves. You know, we try to go by the you know, defer to the in-house, but if they don't show up, we got to plug in at some point, you know?
Right. And, you know, on top of that, you have the labor because, you know, they need to bring somebody in to plug that in. And if it's Sunday, it's in overtime because it's Sunday.
Despite the fact that they have to have engineers there all day, every day anyway. Like,
yeah,
even on a Sunday, they've got
have someone.
Yeah, can't have no one.
Yeah. And that's like the beauty of having it in a hotel. It's front desk, like you look at what groups you have, and then that's who you schedule according to groups. So it just, it's.
But I liken it to Spirit Airlines, where instead of just charging you for what it's going to cost, you know, for you to rent this room with the power included, and that, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, our flights are way cheaper. And then you show up for your flight and they're like, oh, you want to bring that bag on? It's going to be $75.
Right.
You know?
Who doesn't travel with bags? Like, come on, people.
Right. You know, like in some events might be like, well, we're not going to use any power. Can you discount it? Well, no, it's like the flight. I'm not going to check a bag. Can you discount my flight? No, just, you know, a flight's a flight. Like all these other things should just be included. I mean, now obviously the rigging, that's not going to be included because when it comes to the electrical, there's no real actual cost there for the hotel other than the electric bill, which we've already established is going to be a fraction of what the water bill is going to be for 1,000 people for 5 days, right? I can't even imagine what the water bill is. I don't want to give the hotels any ideas here, but not to mention it was probably way more expensive to build the, you know, convention ballroom bathroom than it was to put in the 3-phase power disconnect. That was like $5,000. The bathroom was probably $250,000, you know?
Right. Like I get that the besides the upkeep of the building, there is, you know, people need to get paid. People need to, you know, they need to cover the hotel needs to cover the utilities. And I get it that the bigger convention, the bigger utility bill, I get all of that. But, you know, you have a room rate, you have food and beverage, you have meeting room cost, and then AV.
Yeah.
Like there is, I haven't yet seen hotel, if the hotel is not bringing money and they have negative at the end of the year, they go out of business.
Mhm.
They just go out of business. The hotel is always making a profit.
Oh, yeah.
Always on some level, it's making a profit. It's just justifying to the owners if the profit is here compared to last year. And if it's here compared to the last year, they get good job.
Yeah. And of course, that's a big part of the, everything has to, I think this is, not to get like even more sort of like worldly macro, but I think this is even a little bit of a capitalist issue where it's like everything has to be bigger every year from where it was last year. So there's this drive where, well, we got to figure out a way to come up with more revenue than last year.
Yep.
Because, if not, then I don't get my bonus, or so-and-so is going to be upset, or, the company's not growing, or, well, is infinite growth possible? And at what cost are you? And here again, it's, by the time it gets to us, we're just going, well, it is what it is. They're just ripping you off for the power. I don't know what else to say. When you negotiate, it all goes back to, with me just advising my clients, when you negotiate that contract, tell them the power needs to be included. Rigging, I get it. Rigging's different for every show, different scope and size and scale, and there's actual costs regarding the labor. But at least negotiate out the double time on Sunday. At least negotiate, here's what the cost is going to be for a chain hoist. Here's the market price over here. And this is where you talk to us. You come to us as consultant, you say, well, what's the real market price for a chain hoist? The hotel wants $750 per chain hoist. And I say, that's crazy. The industry average is $250 a week for a chain hoist. Like if I send out a tour, a concert tour, it's going to be $250 a week per chain hoist. Negotiate that rate, before you sign the contract, or somewhere between the market rate and what they want.
And I think that the biggest thing here is have that conversation when you are negotiating the contract.
Right, it's too late once you sign the contract.
With that consulting piece till it's the year of the event, and you
right, because by then you're going to just have to pay what they say.
Exactly. By that time, the contract is negotiated, and oops. But have those conversations.
You could still try to negotiate. There are some things that we're able to do once the contract is signed, but it's definitely a lot harder. It's definitely a lot harder because they know you're coming and they know you need it. There are some strategies there. It's tough when you don't know what something should cost to negotiate. So with clients we have who have already signed a contract, we look at what the rigging and the electrical and the service liaison is going to cost. And I'll go through a hotel EV bill and I'll kind of cross out the things that I don't think need to be there at all. Like they'll try to throw a supervisor on there to babysit us all day, every day. And I'm like, look, load in and load out, maybe. But we don't need someone every day. We don't need it. If we need something, we can call. There's phones,
Right. They are trying to push on you that you need a tech all day.
Yeah.
To supervise everything. Supervise what? Exactly.
Yeah, we know what we're doing.
They come in at the beginning, maybe. And I'm talking here about smaller meetings that don't maybe use.
Yeah, we've seen more often than not. They just come in and they give you their card and they say, here's my phone number. Call me if we need anything.
Exactly.
And I'm like, we're paying $100 an hour to have you on call. And you're usually out doing sets and strikes in other rooms. You know what I mean?
Double dipping.
You're paying you're paying their full day salary times 4.
Yeah. And the other part is also that not every intermediary like me cares about contracting things correctly to make sure that event production has allowable time to set up when it comes to the bigger ones. They, like I said, the hotels will try to, you don't have enough rooms on the first 2 days to have 2 days set up. I had them saying that to me. I stuck to my guns and I was like, no, the client needs it. They have a road show. They are bringing large equipment. They need 2 days and they don't have the rooms, correct, because it's staff.
Guests don't come for 3 days later. Yeah.
In the event production people. So you will never have enough rooms unless you have a big, it's like a destination is a big draw for families and for people to come in early to enjoy it. But in Atlantic City, you won't have a 3 day.
So is that like a thing where, if the AV team needs 2 days of load in and setup, the hotel won't want to give it, even if the client's willing to pay for it. The hotel doesn't want to give it simply because the guest rooms aren't going to be filled for another 3 days?
Correct. They need to, the deal is on the hotel end to maximize the space. That's the product. Maximize the space, maximize the revenue. And when
rooms full, meeting rooms full, F&B,
correct,
for all 3 meals for all the participants every day. Sure.
Correct. When a piece of business is brought to BR, and whoever didn't work in a hotel will not know that the sales manager, they look at the RFP that comes through, and the sales managers should already know by just looking at RFP what will be the kind of objections or hot points when they bring this piece of business for BR. And a good sales manager will be proactive and will ask, okay, why do you need these 2 days? What kind of equipment are we looking at? What kind of production? Can they set up overnight? Can they do blah, blah, blah? There will be a dialogue. Now, there are 2 issues. Not every sales manager wants to have that conversation. And then not every sales manager knows to have that conversation because we have an influx of new labor coming into hotels after all those layoffs of 2020, furloughed and laid off. The new people, they simply don't know because they don't have the experience. So there is more potential for things that just won't make sense when it comes to execution of the program and for the event production. And then there is event production. And what I've also noticed, there's event production, and then there is the lead planner. If they have a third, like an event management company come in and execute the meeting, there are often misalignments between event production and the event management that comes on site that adds another level of stress because they don't talk to each other. They are kind of against each other. Why do you need this? Why do you need that? And the meeting planner or the marketing team, all they have is the vision and and how much money they can bring into the company to justify this conference. Right. So
that sort of plugs in a puzzle piece for me, because it happens to us quite often where we think we're loading in on a given day, and then as we get nearer to the event, we find out no, we have the room starting at 8 a.m. like the next day. And I say, wait, no, we talked about this months ago. We need the room starting at 8 a.m. on Saturday, not Sunday. They say, well, you know what? We had the room on Saturday, then the hotel booked an event in there on Saturday, so we no longer have it. And then I say, if you no longer have it, then, or I'll say, why did you let it go? And they'll be like, well, it turns out we didn't really have it. We thought we had it. And then I'm sitting there going, okay, this isn't a little thing, right? Like, we need 2 days to load in. Now we only have 1. That completely changes what it's going to cost. Now we need an overnight team, which is going to cost double. So now it's going to cost triple what it did before, because now we need an overnight team that's going to cost double plus the next day. And it puts us really on our heels. And this kind of explains why I think maybe what happens a lot of the time as a conference service coordinator at the venue or whatever, they say, oh, there's nothing in the room the day before. You can come in the day before. Then the client tells us you can go in the day before. And then we say, good, we need 2 days to load in. And
It
then,
needs
yeah,
to be on paper. It needs to,
yeah,
it's not in a contract. It won't
right.
happen. I
And
guarantee you it won't happen, because they will book a wedding that Saturday night. So you
right,
not set up during the day, because everything will need to be taken
yeah,
out of the room. It needs to be in the contract. And what's more important, it needs to be on RFP. And ideally, what needs to happen is on RFP, there needs to be an initial communication, hot button, need 2 days for setup, not negotiable.
right.
So the
Yeah,
hotels know that in order for them to book this business, they need to make this sacrifice of not having
yeah,
the wedding or the, this banquet. Usually, and that also happens with like the shows that are 5 day long.
mhm, mhm,
Book the rooms on 24-hour holds.
mhm.
Don't book it from 8 to 5, the
Yeah.
next day 8 to 5. Hotels will sell the space to
Oh
an
yeah.
evening
Yeah.
program, and
Yep.
you will pay double or triple for breaking down the production
Yep.
and then setting it up again. It's
We
it's
used to have that used to happen to us. I remember in our busiest periods, we'd have an evening event. And so we would plan to have the ballroom all day to set up for that evening event. Then the hotel would book a luncheon or something. And we'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. We were the in-house AV company. And we'd say, well, we need that whole day to set up for the evening event. Now you've booked now 3 days away, you've booked a luncheon in there. How are we won't have time. And they're like, well, figure it out, you know? And that was us at the in-house as the in-house AV company. So we're supposed to be partners, you know what I mean? And they just, like, so then we'd have to, whatever, we'd have to like, come in a day earlier to set up for an evening event. And then we'd have to check with the luncheon event, be like, hey, do you mind if there's like all this trust flown in the room that's not for your event? And then they would say, well, no, we don't want that. You know,
right.
if we're not using it, we don't want it in the room. And so then we'd say, okay, tell you what, we'll turn on the moving lights and do some flash and trash and put an extra tech on it. And then we'd have to give away like 10 grand worth of equipment and values just so we could do what we needed to do.
Yes. Smart hotels, when there is that kind of situation, it usually in smart hotels who do business a little bit more proactively, there will be a SOP that the hotel will have, that if there is a evening event booked, in order to book the day, there needs to be a conversation. It's not free sale. It's
Right.
when hotels have free sale that something has a potential like this to happen.
Yeah.
Because usually during BR, that will come up. Hotel will, okay, this group wants to have meetings Monday and Tuesday till 5, but then we have this large conference that starts on Wednesday. Will they have enough time to set up in the evening? And
Right.
the sales manager then can have conversations with that large group, and the smaller group sales manager can also kind of tighten up. Are you really needing the room till 5, or will you be leaving at 3 or 2 because it's last day of your meeting?
Yeah.
I need to know that, so then I can, the group that's after you, we need to have the time to set up production, set up stuff. So it would really help me to know exactly what time you finish. And the hotels that, have those proactive conversations, I've worked at one of them where there was a lot of free sale until the hotel got in trouble with one of the key accounts because of something like that.
Yeah.
And specific rules were put in place through SOPs that this is no longer allowed. When you see evening event booked, you need to have a conversation
Oh yeah.
about booking something at this time. There were basically multiple SOPs that would specify certain circumstances where additional conversations are needed. So there can be prevention of having the, events booked, not enough time for setup, or like on top of.
Especially if you're a venue with repeat clients. I mean, a lot of the places in LA, Hollywood and West Hollywood and West Los Angeles, they're very, very, very heavy in social business, galas, fundraisers. I mean, there's just, I couldn't even count how many, nonprofits and different organizations and a lot. I mean, there's events all over LA County every night at all these, social hotel. And of course, these events repeat every year. It's easier for the event planners to rinse and repeat the event at the same venue year after year after year. And like you said, if just one year, the hotel messes them up because of something like that, a luncheon that infringes on their event, that's it. They'll go to another hotel the next year. And I've sort of seen that happen at where one event was at one hotel for many, many years, and then it changed venues, and it was like, oh, what happened? And they say, well, they really, really messed us up that year. And so we had to, and there are hotels that for like many years, we'd be there for shows like every other week, we're doing an event there. And then over the course of a year, it's like one a month. And then the next year it's like, oh, we're only there 4 times this year. What's going on? And you hear things like, well, yeah, they just weren't taking care of people properly. And so all of their events, they ended up booking them to another, hotel venue.
Yeah. It's, there's a lot of nuances when it comes to, event production, how it all falls in. And like, if I would summarize it with one sentence to people who are listening, is please don't wait with having conversations about your event production. Have them as soon as possible. Make it a part of the initial RFP. At least have an idea of, okay, we have used, Pivot event production last year. Let's reach back out to them and see if this is feasible, what the hotel is proposing, or what would they need if they would come back and do this show for us. Doesn't mean that, we are signing a contract, but let's go back to them, tell them, okay, we are planning another conference, and, we had a great experience with you. Can you please tell me from last year, what would you like to see that makes your life easier as far as contracting the venue? And then, connect the dots. Don't, like, one thing that I have an issue in events industry is that everything is so siloed. Marketing has it to themselves, meeting planning has it to themselves, event production has it to itself, event management has it to itself, and it's like the silos that don't talk to each other. Like, talk to each other, have the conversation,
100%, yeah.
Include people. Like, the more cohesiveness you have, the better is like a holistic understanding of the conference. Like, I'm almost compare it to, like, imagine this conference being like its own little microorganism.
Yeah.
That needs to live.
Yeah.
How would you
ecosystem?
Yes. How would you connect it all together to make sure that there is cohesiveness among all the moving parts, right? So I hope that opens up a little bit, like makes somebody's perspective a little bit more broad on how to involve different people that put their heart, their sweat, that the company is paying for to their conference. Like, the bottom line, nobody goes into conference and says, well, I'm gonna fudge it up.
Right.
You want to perform at your best abilities, right?
Yep. And that's where our advocacy really comes from. We want to, deliver as close to 100% perfect for clients as we can. And a big part of that is having them understand what we do, how we do it, what steps to take to avoid the pitfalls that are so common in our industry. And of course, with regard to some of the presentations that I've put together, have to do with not just those things, but also how to maximize the value in your audiovisual budget.
Right.
Oftentimes through trying to contract better terms with, the things at the venue, which most of the time can be done. Yeah. It's never going to be like, we reduced it to zero. It's never going to be, we took, but if you can take a 20 or 30 grand chunk out of it because know how to negotiate properly, that's 20 or 30 grand you can put towards some special effect we use for the opening of the event, or just somewhere where you'll see the value of it.
Exactly, or an additional entertainment, adding some, pizzazz to decoration, or, order a lawn sign with letters that spell out your company's name, so everybody knows that you are in-house, the biggest event in the hotel. Like, there will always be a way to spend that money.
I remember I always feel flattered when I do an event at a hotel. I remember we did a thing at the Hotel del Coronado once, and I think it was like a more elaborate set than anyone had ever put in there. And, the in-house AV guy was like, wow, do you mind if I take some pictures of this? And I was like, well, yeah, I kind of do mind actually, because
I don't want you to copy this, right? And
well, that's one thing, yeah, but also I was like, you just charged me $1,500. Like, not an hour earlier, I had to rent something from them that cost about $500 to buy, and they charged me $1,500 to rent it. And I was like, yeah, no. And then we did an event, I think, at the Gaylord National. And we put in a screen that was curved, a projection screen that was 20 feet tall, and it went from one wall to the other. And at least at that time, everybody that went through the room was just like, whoa, we've never seen a screen this big before.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that's a ballroom that I really like, the ballrooms at the Gaylord National, because they've got more rig points than most ballrooms that I've ever been in. That's a nice room to plan an elaborate set in, because it's a little off the beaten path, like most of the Gaylords are, but small price to pay for at least for somebody producing an event, for a ballroom with high ceilings, lots of rig points, a built-in stage. Those are amenities that we really like as AV producers.
We need to make another episode, Nathan, on what to look for in a meeting space when you go do site selection, what questions to ask so your event production is flawless. Like, how many rigging points, it's absolute minimum, because I think that people look at the meeting space, seating wise, but they don't look at it from the event production standpoint, unless they run into issues and now they know. To prevent people from learning the wrong way by their mistakes and having their boss mad at them. Why did this happen? So it would be awesome to have another episode.
Oh, I'd love to.
On that. So I will stay in touch, and we will schedule another recording, because it will be also very valuable to me. But yeah, just few bullet points. What you would say is the biggest takeaway from our conversations to the audience, if they would need to do one or two things to make your production setup easier, what would those two things be?
Oh, for us, 100% getting in touch as early as possible. Like, as soon as you're having an event, get us involved in the conversation so we can help you with that early contract negotiation if it hasn't been done yet, make you aware of the pitfalls, things that you're going to end up paying for that you might not be aware of when you first sign the contract, so they don't come back to bite you later. I think that's just one of the biggest things, so much bigger of all the things that most event planners don't do that they could do, that's probably the biggest. Just get your technology, audiovisual team involved as early as you possibly can, as soon as you know you're having that event.
And even if the vision is still being developed, at least get them involved and do like a last year review where you do have a conversation. If we just repeated it exactly the same, or go bigger, right? Or go bigger, what would you like to see from the hotel standpoint for me to contract to have that, so you don't have to charge me overtime or additional fees? I think that is a smart way to plan meetings, and especially if the conference is always growing, there is always much more innovation, there is much more wow factor. That's definitely one of the smart ways to start planning the conference. Don't wait till it's few months out.
And I think going along with that, another big takeaway, would be don't be afraid of it. I think that part of the reason that people wait a long time is that it kind of stresses them out, so they put it off. One of the things that I'm trying to do through outreach to people like yourself is let people know, I implore you to call me and ask questions, because this is what I love to do. I love to educate, and also prepare yourself to take some time if you want to understand more than you historically have. Prepare yourself to take some time to have discussions that will benefit you in the long run. It'll require some time investment. It'll require some patience, and because there is so much there to understand, and nobody can download it all at once. But I think that event planners and meeting coordinators, at least in terms of what's needed and how to get from point A to point Z, you don't necessarily need to know all the technical stuff. You just have to know how you get from point A to point Z, and you just have to learn what your production partner needs to know to get you from point A to point Z successfully. And that it takes time, and so get in touch early and be prepared to invest some time in it if you want it to go well.
Yes,
because I think that's the other big challenge. People get a hold of us late and they don't have the time, and so it ends up being a very rapid, accelerated schedule of what really should be planned over a larger amount of time, with a little bit more discussion and a little bit more where you have time to look at options, look at pricing, negotiate a little bit more. Sometimes it ends up being more expensive simply because we're doing it so rapidly with a minimized schedule.
Yes. And even if one might wonder, okay, so if I come to you with ask to consult, but they don't give you the business, you help them understand everything, but let's say they don't give you a business, the 5 hours of consulting is minimal cost compared to overtime hours for labor, being charged, not having correct concessions. That's my big one. Like sometimes hotels will throw AV concessions because that's a separate department, so they can. And they are there just to be there, not really useful to the client. So have the consultation to also save money. The $500 or $600 in consultation fees with you that they will pay will save them thousands of dollars in the future on many equipment, labor, blah blah blah, all those other items. So I'm not discouraging anyone to not use you. It's just some people might have different approaches to this. So just consult with other event production companies.
Yep.
You know, you go to the doctor, you get second opinion. If you feel like something is missing, have a second opinion of another event production company.
And I even encourage clients, you know, like they come to us, you know, I say, listen, don't send me an RFP that, you know, that you might think is complete. You know, feel free to call me, say, hey, how does this RFP look? What should we include? What questions should we ask this vendor? And I would encourage you to send that RFP to 5 different AV companies, see how they all come back. But let me help you put together an RFP that will make sense to the vendors so that they're not just all guessing, because you could get 5 quotes back and they'll be all over the board and you'll have no idea why. The vendors that tell you what make and model of something they're using, well, then I can look at it and I can say, yeah, their speaker cabinets are expensive because they're high end. They're expensive cabinets. Or I could look and say, well, it just says speaker cabinet and they're charging this much. Well, ask them what cabinet it is. And if they don't know, run away.
Right.
Or if they won't tell you, run away. Same with, you know, the lighting and the video and the projection and the LED. A lot of times I can look at other companies' RFPs and just go, you don't want to use them. Sometimes they do include the make and model, and it's to their own detriment because I look at it and go, you don't want that stuff on your show.
Right. Well, it was so awesome to chat with you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Another hour. But we will offline schedule another time where we go in depth on another event production pain point that, you know, you see in the industry that we might help clients think about it maybe a little differently. But this has been awesome. I learned a lot, and I'm currently reviewing an AV quote from one of the hotels that doesn't have an equipment descriptions on it. So I'm going to actually send an email asking them to put what kind of equipment they are going to be using, because it's just LCD project X lumen, right?
Yeah.
I know.
Hard, you know.
Yeah, but what kind? Like, are you gonna just go with some kind of off-brand, or is it something reliable? So yes, I will definitely change a few things in my process, how I look at the proposals for my clients from different AV companies. So this has been very educational for me as well.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Agnes. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I will be in touch so we can schedule another chat like that. Maybe we can continue with series of talks where we help clients have a better understanding of event production side.
Sounds good. All right, looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Take care.